I'll call the meeting of the West Virginia Public Energy Authority to order. Determine that there's a quorum present. At this time, we'll move to approval of the minutes from our September 7th, 2023 meeting. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes as distributed to the members previously. One second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion adopted. Now we'll get into the agenda of the meeting. First up, we're going to get a presentation from Hans Reimer, who's a senior consultant with the United States Department of Energy, their loan office, their loan program office. And Hans, Mr. Reimer, has worked the last few months with the state. Really, Nick Preservati's done a ton of work on this. They have designated, which will make more sense here after his presentation, but the Public Energy Authority has officially been designated what's called a SEFI, a State Energy Financing Institution, through the U.S. Department of Energy's Loan Program Office. So this is puts a tool in the toolbox of the Public Energy Authority that if, as we develop a program, if we so choose, if the authority's will is, then we can utilize the programs that Mr. Reimer will go in and explain. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Reimer, and thank you very much for being here virtually. This is going to be very informative for everybody. So please take over.
Thank you, Secretary Bailey. I really appreciate the invitation to join you today. And Mr. Preservati, it's been really a pleasure to work with you these past several months, and I'm really pleased to be able to share with you the resources that we have available and hopefully be a resource to the state in your policy strategy. I'm joined by my colleague, Alanya Schofield, and we'll divide the presentation this morning into two pieces. So I'll talk a fair amount about the SEFI Loan Authority, and then Alanya will talk about our Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment Authority. And, we think both will be helpful resources for you. So I am going to see if pull off the high stakes, share my screen, move here. Okay, there we go. And slideshow from the beginning. So is that coming through nicely?
Yes.
Great. All right, thank you. So as mentioned, Alanya and I, we're consultants to the Department of Energy, the Loan Programs Office, and I'm going to share a lot of information. We're going to share a lot of information today. I think our real objective is just to highlight the opportunity, and then if there's interest, we'll follow up with an additional set of meetings and take it from there. So very broadly, it's worth noting that the Loan Programs Office is different than other federal grant-making institutions. Our funding opportunity is always available. The door is always open, and we can work with you on applications. A lot of times in the grant-making arena, you can't get help from the federal agency in preparing your grant proposal. But with the Loan Programs Office, we're here to work with you and help you put forward your strongest application. So it is quite a significant difference. And, we're different than a bank. We are really flexible financing. We are patient capital, and, we work with the applicant. So as we are building an engagement with an applicant, we will convene weekly, bi-weekly meetings to walk through resources, to talk through the application materials and the process. So, one kind of high level takeaway will be as you potentially identify areas of interest, we would set up consistent meetings to provide feedback to you as we go. We are financing across the array of clean energy infrastructure and opportunities. So we're providing funding now to battery manufacturing companies to build facilities, to utilities providing new generation capacity, to pipeline fixing leaks in pipelines. We're across an entire array, and almost any investment you can envision, provided there are certain benefits to it, are potentially eligible. There's ways to find eligibility at LPO. There's a lot on this slide, so I won't expect to convey all of that here. And you do have the slideshow, and of course that'll be a useful follow-up, but just some very high level here. We will only lend at most to 80% of the cost of the project, and it's usually less. So we are required statutorily to be the senior debt on a project and not to exceed 80% of the project costs. So projects have to come to us with significant equity and subordinated capital. It might be at least 20, but really more like 30%. When we're doing a manufacturing facility, it might be more like 50%. So we are there as the debt partner, but there must be significant equity partners in a deal. It does cost some money to go through our process. We offer rates that applicants who get a loan from us, there's no comparison to what they would be able to get in the private sector. But that doesn't mean that it is free. So an applicant, although there's no application fee, an applicant will typically hire project advisors. And then as we get into due diligence, we will require the applicant we will hire independent advisors that the applicant will pay for. So those costs typically run in the several single-digit millions, less than 5 million. And for that reason, we generally say that an applicant is going to most likely want to borrow more than $100 million as kind of a pencil out point. But it's not a hard rule, and it does depend on what there's no statutory requirement. It does depend on what the project has available. And those costs can be repaid from a loan. So if the Public Energy Authority wanted to be the applicant, or if a entity that you were partnering with wanted to be the applicant, those costs, while they are paid up front, can be recaptured from the loan proceeds. The only cost that cannot be recaptured is the 0.6% of the borrowed amount that's due at closing. So there are some upfront costs. The rates are going to be somewhat depending on the program. And Alanya will get into this with the 1706 program, but with our two main authorities, 1703, 1706, it's Treasury plus 3/8. And then in 1703, there's typically an additional risk premium. In 1706, that risk premium is generally offset with our credit subsidy appropriated funds. Okay, next slide. Sorry, my computer is sort of freezing here. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we have multiple loan authorities that are relevant. We have the traditional innovative authority that companies come to us when they have a technology where they can't get an affordable loan. We've been providing those loans for years. And by the way, I'm sorry, I can't see the screen. So, I can't see you. So if you have a question you'd like to interject with, please just, be vocal, and then I'll pause. So we have our traditional innovative energy program, which has been expanded to cover innovative supply chain. So there's a lot of private sector, they're generally private sector applicants. And then we have two authorities that don't require innovative technology. So that's the key here. One of them, which I'm focusing on now, is the State Energy Financing Institution, SEFI Authority. And then the other is the Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment Authority. So SEFIs, very pleased that the West Virginia Public Energy Authority has requested a determination as to whether the authority can be a SEFI. And our lawyers reviewed statutory information and concluded that yes, the PEA is indeed a SEFI. So what that means is that projects that you might support would be eligible to apply to LPO without having an innovative technology, in other words, using a commercialized technology. They could apply to LPO is provided that the energy authority is making a meaningful investment in the cost of the project to de-risk the project and participate in the cost of the project. So we're very pleased about that and looking forward to working with you. The requirements for a project to apply under that CEFI authority, the project needs to reduce emissions. And of course, it needs to have a reasonable prospect of repaying the loan. So that's in our statute, and that's what gives rise to our due diligence process. Getting a loan from LPO is, quite similar to getting a very large loan from a bank. There's going to be a lot of due diligence. Comes with the territory. And of course, it must rely on one of the 13 eligible technologies. There are very broadly two ways to think about utilizing our CEFI loan authority. So I'm going to kind of high level describe them for you. The first is when you're the investor in the project. So envision a private sector applicant relying on your investment to borrow $500 million, $1 billion from LPO. Under that scenario, LPO might be 65, 70% of the cost of the project. That's the dark blue share of the stack there. And then you've got a CEFI meaningful investment illustrated in green, and you've got sponsor and private equity illustrated there in blue. So again, this is the presumed approach for a large project, 100 million plus. There is also the option for the CEFI to leverage LPO's authority to lend to smaller projects. So if you have an aggregation of projects that kind of fit a theme that can be organized as, in a sense, a single project, but they cost $1 million, 10 million, 25 million a piece. Those projects really would be too small to apply to us. But if you have identified a portfolio in that way and you wanted to leverage our authority to make lower cost capital available to them, then you could be the borrower, or you could organize a special purpose vehicle to be the borrower. So under that case, the same general framework applies. Our limit on what share of the cost we will lend to, less than 80%. A CEFI investment, that would be the Public Energy Authority's, qualifying investment in the project. And then the Public Energy Authority could bring the remainder of the capital stack or organize equity to participate. Both options are available. So that's the kind of general second high level way to think about us is if you've got a collection of projects you'd like to help identify a lower cost of capital, you can aggregate them into a portfolio. And then as long as those projects are similar in nature and really are structured as one project, it might be a set of investments in manufacturing facilities or a set of loans to companies for their fleets, then that can be positioned as a single project. So that concludes the 1703 segment. I'll pass it to my colleague Alanya for the 1706 segment, and then we're available for questions.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Hans.
Sorry, I was turning it over to your colleague there. Go ahead.
I'm going to mute my device one moment. Okay, is that better?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So as Hans said, my name is Alanya Schofield, and I'm also a contractor for the Loan Programs Office. And my specific role is to be a team coordinator for our 1706 Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment Loan Authority. And so this loan authority was created through the Inflation Reduction Act. And the intent of it is really to help accelerate the country's transition to a clean energy economy. And so unlike the 1703 innovative energy and supply chain programs that Hans mentioned at the beginning, 1706, or the Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment Program, is really focused on existing technologies, and it does not have an innovation requirement. So we can go to the next slide, please. So 1706 is focused on projects that fall into two general categories. The first category is projects that retool, repower, repurpose, or replace existing energy infrastructure that has ceased operations. And I'll talk through a couple examples of these in a minute. The second category is projects that enable operating energy infrastructure to avoid, reduce, utilize, or sequester air pollution, or GHGs. And the important element of 1706 is there must be a nexus or connection to that existing energy infrastructure. And the general categories that apply there are either the facilities or equipment that are associated with the generation or transmission of electricity, or the production, processing, and delivery of fossil fuels. And so these are the general categories. On the next slide, I'll go into examples, but one thing I did want to note too is that for our loan authority, we do have to reach conditional commitments by September 2026. So we do have a shorter time frame for our loan authority than for some of the 1703 programs. If you can go to the next slide, please. So this slide talks about some of the different example projects, and I'll talk about a few of the ones that are the most common that we're seeing now and that I think could be relevant for West Virginia. So the first category that we're seeing is where typically a utility, though sometimes an independent power producer, is retiring a fossil plant, and they're planning on replacing it with some combination of clean energy, some sort of renewable, solar, wind, and often storage. And so in that case, it's really a replacement of that capacity and energy that is being retired in the plant retirement. Another category that we're seeing a lot of is transmission reconductoring. And the intent here is an existing transmission line, going to continue operating it, but making upgrades and reconductoring it that will enable it to carry more energy across that system. Another category that we see a lot of are pipeline replacements. And by this, I mean the category where a natural gas utility is replacing existing infrastructure's existing network of pipelines with the intent of both safety, increased safety, as well as the intent of reducing GHG emissions through leakage. Another common type of application that we see are situations where there is an existing facility and the owner wants to upgrade or uprate that facility. And that could be existing hydro facilities, hydroelectric facilities that might require sort of dam safety projects or upgrades of the existing turbines in the facility. It could be upgrading wind or solar with more efficient, newer technologies than what currently exists. Final category that I'll talk about is also the conversion of existing pipes, either from natural gas, pipes that are currently carrying natural gas, but to then carry either carbon dioxide for sequestration or hydrogen. And so those are a couple of the different categories and a couple of examples of the types of projects that would fall under 1706. If you can go to the next slide, please. I wanted to just touch on briefly the 1703 innovative supply chain category or loan authority, because this is one where I think there could be some opportunities for West Virginia as well. And in this category, it's really about helping fund the development of energy supply chains and innovative energy supply chains. So examples here might be the manufacturing of small modular nuclear reactor components, or it might be the manufacturing of batteries or battery components that could either go into electric vehicles or for grid related storage. So those are the types of manufacturing and supply chain projects that also can be eligible through the Loan Programs Office. And then the final slide I have here is Just a quick call out around nuclear, because we have heard that there is some interest potentially in nuclear for West Virginia. And this is an area that could be funded through LPO. A couple of scenarios there that are the most, I think, viable would be the repurposing of a retired coal plant or some other sort of fossil plant, and replacing it with an SMR and using that existing infrastructure. And that could qualify under a 1706 program. And then the other category is supporting nuclear manufacturing. And that does not have to be tied to existing infrastructure. That could qualify through the 1703 Innovative Supply Chain Program, where it could be a greenfield development or developed sort of not attached to an existing energy infrastructure. So if you go to the last slide, that was all that we had prepared today, but we are happy to answer any questions that you might have. And you should have access to these slides for reference, because I know there's a lot of content there. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'll turn over any questions from members of the authority.
Ask one.
Yeah.
We're not hearing if there's
You can't hear me right now? Wave your hand if you, well, that doesn't make any sense.
no.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we're still not able to hear you.
We haven't changed anything.
Okay, Collins muted his mic earlier.
What about now?
Yeah.
See us, can't hear
Yeah.
us.
They said they can't see us.
I think he said, I can't see you.
Are you hearing me?
Yes. Can you hear us now?
Ah, there we go. Yes.
Okay, great.
Hans, thank you, Annalena, for your presentation. Very enlightening. Just one quick question. You spoke earlier about accumulating or clustering smaller projects into one larger application. Is that pretty commonplace?
Well, great question. This program is new. We really have been ramping up the authority over the course of this calendar year. I can share that there is a state that is well into their planning to utilize that strategy. We think that more states will definitely take advantage of it. So everything is kind of new, but we do expect that it will be utilized.
Thank you.
Further questions?
One thing I think we are intended to mention was also that our cost of capital is typically lower than what utilities have access to. It's not always the case, but it can be the case, in which case when a utility borrows from us, that reduces pressure on that utility to raise rates in order to make the investments that they're looking to make. So just a consideration as well for your strategy.
That's a great point, Hans. Just to clarify on that. So any project that we funded through 1706, the Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment Program, would get a rate of Treasury, whatever the duration of the loan is, whether it's a 10-year or 20, 30-year loan, the Treasury plus 3/8. And so that is a lower cost of debt than most companies or projects would be able to find. Through the 1703 programs, it's that rate of Treasury plus 3/8 plus a risk-based premium, which would increase the cost a bit, but still it's meant to be a viable option for projects that otherwise would struggle to get commercial loans.
Could you all talk about, I guess, just generally other states? Like, how many other states are diving into this? Are any of them far along on setting up a CEPI or taking advantage of 1708 and these other programs? If so, are there any examples you could give us?
Sure. I'll start with the CEFI examples. We have an RFI that Michigan has out now that is looking to assess the marketplace and the interest for CEFI applications to LPO. So they are, that RFI has been published on their website, and their economic development team is actively talking to the companies that they think are, interesting prospects, and they're looking for responses that are due in the next week or so. New Jersey has an RFI that is out similarly to test the marketplace. They've identified several priorities of interest, community solar portfolios, building decarbonization, and transportation investments. And they will receive responses to the RFI and then consider their strategy. We anticipate an RFI coming out soon in Minnesota. New York has a funding program that has been public for several months, where companies can apply to NYSERDA, their energy authority, and then use those loan loss reserve investments from NYSERDA to qualify to apply to LPO. Those are just some of the projects. States that have existing green banks are, they're a little further down the field because they have teams that this is in their wheelhouse. So, we've got a few examples of that. But on the other hand, this is still early stages. And as Alanya said, the 1706 program, which does not require state investment, it can benefit from state strategy or policy, but doesn't necessarily require state investment. Where was I going with that? We're still in initial stages of the CEFI program. So we anticipate in the coming 6 months, we'll see additional interest from states across the country.
And on 1706, it is also a new program as well with CEFI. So we're still in the sort of ramping stage, but we are seeing applications from across the country. We have a number in your general neck of the woods, and as far flung as Hawaii, and or sort of across the states, we are seeing either applications or we're having preliminary conversations, and that's something that we are always happy to do, is to have preliminary conversations. And what we recommend is that whatever entities are involved in that come to us with specific projects, and then we can really get into the nuts and bolts of, would those projects be eligible and would they be a good fit for an LPO loan?
I understand that we have applications in the pipeline now in 49 out of 50 states.
So there we go.
49 out of 50, is that for both CEPI and 1706 or just 1706?
That's across the loan programs office.
Oh, okay. It would be good to know the specific states, well, maybe it's all of them in our general area. What my thought was if we're part of the PJM, which is such a regional relationship, that it would be good for us to, at least touch base and coordinate with our fellow PJM states to see if we're
going to be happy to facilitate that in any respect. Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Well, seeing none, Hans, Alanya, I really appreciate your all's time coming to talk. I'm actually, this is a lot for everybody to take in. I'm sure we'll probably have plenty of follow-up questions, and just appreciate your assistance and letting us know what options we have available here. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation. Really appreciate the chance to share, and look forward to our next conversation. Thank you.
Nice to meet everyone.
Take care.
Great. Well, now we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which will be a presentation from Jessica Moore, who's the director of our West Virginia Geological and Economic Survey. One of the statutory responsibilities of the authority is to foster, encourage, and promote the mineral development industries in the state. So I thought it would be good, we all know that we're rich in coal and natural gas, but I thought it would be good to see a kind of higher level overview of all of the minerals that we have and kind of the updates that are coming across these industries. So, Ms. Moore, thank you very much for being here.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
thank you so much for having me. And you described the talk perfectly. I was asked to present to you information on earth materials in West Virginia's energy portfolio that may not be used for our traditional energy systems, through coal or gas, but that as we, look at the build out of advanced or clean energy systems, might not only be useful, but might be essential to some of these systems. So we'll talk about, first how we got here, which is West Virginia's rich legacy of energy production and the knowledge that has come, generation after generation from that energy infrastructure. And then talk about a few different specific areas. So the first one is infrastructure raw materials, and this is sandstone, aggregates, clays, all of the building blocks of any kind of economic development project, infrastructure, large construction projects. We'll move into geothermal energy, talk about two different prospects there, then on to critical minerals, and finally end up with geologic storage and sequestration. We'll talk about carbon storage today, but the West Virginia Survey has worked on natural gas liquid storage, and we are working now with the Department of Energy on hydrogen storage. So just a note about energy transitions. This is not our first. It will not be our last. And through all of our energy transitions in this country, the people of Appalachia have been there to provide those resources and innovate through the energy transition, whether it was the timbering of our forested slopes, the early genesis of the petroleum industry, which came out of the salt industry, to the coal industry that has been the backbone of our economy for years, generations. And finally, the shale gas revolution, where we went into the source rock and can now drill horizontally for 4 or 5 miles, steer steel rods through the ground for 4 miles and extract those hydrocarbons from a single surface expression. It truly is a marvel of modern innovation. And what you can see here is that as we move through these energy transitions, with each one, consumption continues to grow. So we really are going to need to look broadly at the solutions for a society that continues to consume natural resources. So just a note about my agency, the West Virginia Geological and Economic Survey is a commerce agency under the leadership of Secretary Bailey. We are non-regulatory. We've been an agency in West Virginia state government since 1897. And that long view really does benefit the state, to bring all of that information to bear. We're headquartered on Cheat Lake in Morgantown, the old Mont Chateau State Forestry Lodge. We have a little mini museum. Please stop by if you're ever in town. About 35 full-time employees. So every state has a geological survey except for Hawaii and Georgia. And we run in about the bottom third. So range from literally 1 person to 135 plus in Texas. I think they have the largest. And our programs are divided into coal, oil and gas, and general geoscience. And you'll see that those are somewhat of a misnomer, since I'm not going to talk about coal and I'm not going to talk about oil and gas, but everything you'll see is original research generated by the agency. So as I said, we've been doing this for a long time. There in the center, the gentleman in suspenders standing up is the first state geologist, I.C. White, namesake of White Hall at WVU. It was his family farm. And throughout the years, West Virginia has had geologists out in the field collecting data. And we work really hard to try and archive that data and modernize it so that we can use it in instances like this when we're going in and doing a deep dive into the portfolio to see what might be there that, perhaps we missed. Okay, so the first topic is infrastructure raw materials. And this is, just what it sounds like, the building blocks of any major project. Here, your proximity to source is critical. After about 10 or 20 miles, your costs to transport materials start to go up exponentially. So you need to be close to the source. You need to have a specific material grade. And to my knowledge, there is no statewide database of material grade for these infrastructure raw materials. So I think that's maybe something we could work toward. There is some federal legislation that talks about covered resources. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what covered resources means, and I'm not 100% certain on the true legal definition, but maybe what it means in West Virginia. So I have links to both of these in your packet. You can, if you're interested, look at them in more detail. But basically, what it means is that in areas where you anticipate an infrastructure build out, so in proximity to major highway corridors, in areas that you've identified as being prime for development in the short term, you would need to not only look at the resources you have in your quarries today, but perhaps where future resources might need to be extracted and what development is coming there. So I'm going to use an example from the Eastern Panhandle, but first, a note on geologic maps. So one of our main programs is our state mapping, bedrock geologic mapping program, where we send our geologists out into the field to map the bedrock geology. And this is what a finished product looks like. And I'll put the county outlines on it so you can kind of get an orientation. Each of those different colors is a different map unit. And based on how they are oriented, we can tell things like what the rocks are doing beneath the surface. And we can predict perhaps their extent. But if you do work in the woods of West Virginia, you know that there's a lot of vegetation. It's hard to see the rocks. You can make inferred assumptions, but sometimes you just can't see what's there. Okay, so we're going to zoom in on the Eastern Panhandle, area of probably the most economic development and people moving in the state. Each of these black dots is a mineral producer. So that could be sand, that could be crushed stone, limestone, in a lot of cases, or shale. And I want you to look at the two dots that are near Martinsburg. I've been told that the pointer doesn't really work on the screen, where you have I-81 coming up through. And there are two dots there that I'm going to focus in on. Okay, so this is what the geology looks like when you get up close. Again, each one of those different colors is a different map unit. And it has a key. So the capital letter is the geologic age of the rock. So O stands for Ordovician. And then the lowercase letters tell you something about the rock unit. It could be the name of it. It could be a certain interval. So these two dots are on two different units. One is on OMC, which is Ordovician mixed carbonates. Those are some of the units that we're looking at for carbon storage in the deep subsurface. OM is the Martinsburg Shale, and that's the equivalent of the Utica Shale that is being produced for natural gas, also in the western part of the state. Here in the Eastern Panhandle, they're forming ridges, or actually, since they're carbonates, they're forming valleys. You can see that there's some offset in the rocks. So this is where we have faulting that has shifted the rock layers. And so just because you're in a certain area, you could go a mile or two away and be in a completely different rock unit. So if you have to mine in OMC, all of a sudden you are limited on where you can go for your next location. Okay? Once you add in the LiDAR, you can see what it looks like, and you can very clearly see the pit, for the quarry, and some other features. So when we talk about covered resources in West Virginia, LiDAR has been a game changer for us. It is so useful to be able to do an office-based reconnaissance where you can start to see, the major ridges where they're formed, and that's a different rock type than where you have the valleys. You can see your rivers. So this is wonderful information for us to have. So also wonderful information for planners to have, because here you have this quarry, this active operation, you have to stay in OMC, and you've developed cul-de-sac neighborhoods all around it. And so when you have a developer come in and say, I want to locate here, it probably is prudent to go ahead and look at see, what are the covered resources in this area. Okay, moving on. And I'm happy to discuss any of these topics in more detail, but in the interest of time, we'll just hit them all at a pretty high level. So West Virginia has two opportunities that we've identified for geothermal energy. One is kind of your traditional, thermal resource, and then the other is a little bit innovative and something that only a place like West Virginia could perhaps take advantage of. This all started with Google. Google.org, which is their philanthropic arm, did a statewide or nationwide study of geothermal resources. And so the map at the bottom is the result of that study. And what you can see is that most of the geothermal resources located in the western part of the country, but that over West Virginia, there's a hot spot, a little anomaly. And so we started investigating that after this publication in 2011. And so the Department of Energy's Geothermal Technologies Office produced a great report. It's called the GeoVision Report. And so this little thermometer tells you what temperature you need to utilize certain geothermal resources. So for the most part in West Virginia, we're going to be below 200 degrees Fahrenheit, 250 degrees Fahrenheit. But you can still do a lot with that. The lowest temperature is geothermal heat pumps. You can use it for that. But then you start getting into, maybe some other categories that you could utilize. What you must have is proximity to users. So you have to be over a large user group because you're going to lose your thermal resource if you have to transport it over a distance. So think about, schools, you think about shopping malls, you think about downtown districts, where you may have to retrofit, but you've got a lot of buildings that are close together. But we've done two different mine pool studies. The first was with the Department of Environmental Protection, just to start to get an idea of our hydraulic gradients, where water is flowing, which mines are going to be flooded, which mines are above grade and are going to stay dry. And then, so that is on your map here, your statewide map, all of the blue pools were identified as flooded mine pools that could potentially be utilized, especially in the southern part of the state. A lot of times that water is potable or near potable, so it could be a fresh water source. Up north, the Pittsburgh mines are flooded and they have a lot of volume, but you've got a lot of sulfur, a lot of acidity in that water, and so perhaps not as applicable to some of these other applications. So from there, we worked with Marshall University to do a little bit of a deeper dive and look at some of these user groups, look at the flooded mine pools that are beneath them, and see if we could link them, source to sink. And what we found was that there are several different locations that have flooded mine pools that could be used for mine pool geothermal. And the technology here is incredibly simple. You put a pump in the pool and run it through a heat exchanger. The mine pool is at an ambient temperature, which is about 54 degrees or something like that. And so what you can see from the map is that you have several different communities in southern West Virginia that are over large flooded mine pools. The city of Beckley is located directly over top of several. Oak Hill, Sophia, which is the birthplace of Robert C. Byrd, has a cute little downtown. So as we explore this, we are finding that we think there is potential, but we want to see where else it's been deployed. And so there were some deployments in the United States, the one in Pennsylvania, but those aren't very large scale. In Europe, however, they are looking at this in more detail. So there is a project in northern Spain, in Asturias, that is looking at coal mines. Edinburgh, the city of Edinburgh in Scotland, is using a flooded mine pool for heating and cooling. And Newfoundland is also looking into this. And all of these articles that I linked were published in the past 6 months or year. So this is something that a lot of different people are starting to look at, and the Geothermal Technologies Office is definitely interested in this kind of project. So now we're going to move into the more traditional geothermal. So we were just talking about these flooded mine pools at 55 degrees, give or take. So if you go over a little bit farther to the east, suddenly we have natural hot springs. Water's, this is 70, 72, up to 100 degrees. So what has happened? We're at about the same depth. What is heating this water, as you move further to the east? And, why do we have igneous and metamorphic rocks? West Virginia is supposed to be a sedimentary basin. We have 3 miles of rocks, sedimentary rocks beneath our feet before you get to anything igneous or metamorphic. So why, these are all triangles where our state map program has identified igneous or metamorphic rocks, do we have these here? And the answer is because we have a geothermal anomaly. We are identifying these igneous intrusions in the field, and I gave you the most spectacular example. This is Cass Cave in Pocahontas County, and we have some geologists on staff who are cavers, and they found this igneous intrusion. This is a basalt dike that comes up vertically from whatever depth into the limestone and shales of Cass Cave. And so we have sampled that intrusion, and we believe that it is the youngest igneous intrusion on the East Coast. We still have to do some more detailed testing because you have to account for potential weathering. But that tells us that we have hot rock close to the surface, and perhaps closer to the surface than a lot of different places along the East Coast. And we even have a volcano of sorts. Well, it's in Virginia, but it's close. Trimble Knob in Monterey, Virginia is a volcano-like explosive feature. So you had a couple of those basalt intrusions that came up, and when they got probably close to the water table, they exploded, and it created this collapse feature. All the rocks came back in. So you've got these two igneous bodies with the collapsed breccia in between, and it makes a little volcano like shape. And these are some field notes from when we went out to look at it. So we've been trying to map this statewide. We've worked with Cornell. Cornell is very invested in geothermal energy. New York State is very invested in geothermal energy. And they came in and did a play fairway analysis across the entire basin. And so from that, we have some thermal data. And again, most of the state at 15,000 feet, which is pretty deep in the subsurface, is going to be around that 200, 250 degrees. But we do have this anomaly that we will continue to investigate because I think it does have some potential. WVU just drilled a well they tried to get to 15,000 feet. They made it to around 10 in the Tuscarora sandstone, but we're able to save the hole enough to re-enter and try and get to that deeper depth to try and get those thermal measurements. But this will help us calibrate our thermal data. The next topic is critical minerals. So if a technology has become smarter, smaller, faster, or greener, name the tech, it has to do with a critical mineral. I mean, it's the reason that our cell phones look like they do instead of the brick, with the antenna and the squashy keyboard. They are essential for many components of modern technology, but especially energy and battery storage and national security and defense. Those are the two main utilizations for these critical mineral technologies. They are being mined currently in areas with serious environmental and humanitarian concerns. Cobalt is being mined by barefoot kids in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. China is responsible for some of the worst environmental disasters from their rare earth element mining. It's not good. And there are major geopolitical implications to supply chain disruptions. So the markets are so sensitive because a lot of times there's only a few hundreds of tons on the market. And so, the entities that control that could, drop the price. And then so somebody who's trying to get into the market, all of a sudden, it's no go. But there is significant potential for enrichment in West Virginia. And most of it is in traditional waste products. So, the potential for beneficial reuse is very high. Put these in there as I talk about the specific elements so you can, get an idea of what they're used for. But in the electrification of our fleet, it's everything from the batteries, which I think we all know about, to the catalytic converter and the body and all the sensors. They all require one of these elements that could be sourced from a hostile foreign nation. And then the other category, of course, is national security and defense. So a Navy SEAL carries gear containing at least 20 metals for which the United States is greater than 50% import reliant. And that's not safe and that's not sustainable. And we have to onshore some of that production so that we can make sure that we have significant capabilities. And those capabilities, in fact, I've met with the Department of Defense on this. They are most concerned about human capital. So you could financially bring up a junior mining company to the level they need to be to produce, but you have to start a student today for that student to be ready in 5 years, just ready. And that's a concern. And students are not going into traditional mining and metallurgical programs. I've talked to University of Kentucky. They do have a good program, and they said they have to recruit on a one-on-one basis. And they don't just have to talk to the student, they have to talk to mom and dad and make sure that mom and dad are on board with them wanting to go into a mining profession. I think West Virginia is one of the few places where mining is not stigmatized. A lot of our young kids don't want to go into it, and it's absolutely essential that we recruit the next generation of the workforce. We have been studying not just the coals, we have a robust elemental database from the coals, but also the clays. So there are some reasons for this that I won't get into. There's a geologic system that means these elements get concentrated in the clays. And so we just wrapped a first-of-a-kind study with the U.S. Geological Survey. It looked at 8 states across 2 sedimentary basins and collected the full spectrum of critical minerals in these underclays. And what you can see here is that we have enrichment, and the way that I symbolized this was, obviously the larger circles are more concentrations, but I didn't really display anything that was much above crustal background. So pretty much everything that you see is elevated in some way, which is pretty remarkable. So that copper is on the left, gallium is on the right. Gallium, worldwide production of gallium is only 550 million tons. And here we have concentrations up to 60 parts per million. So, you have to, it's tablespoons from tons, but, if you have the right extraction processes, here in just the Appalachian Basin, we could have a lot of that supply from our traditional waste materials. Nickel, same thing, but you can see that the distribution is sporadic. We've got a lot of work to do here to try and figure out, which clays associated with which coals, and how that enrichment varies from place to place. The plots are rare earth elements. So these are kind of a mixed bag of 17 different elements. And we show consistent enrichment in that too. So the bottom line is the concentration in a chondrite meteor, which is what we use as our baseline, and it's a logarithmic scale from there. So 10 times chondrite enrichment, 100 times, 1,000 times. And across the basin, we are enriched, consistently enriched. And the pattern is the same, which means we are coming from a consistent source. And in geology, this is like what we like to see, because if you have predictability, then you can start to look forward to what's next, where do we go next. We're looking at waste products in earnest for the Department of Energy as part of their MAPCOR program. And this looks at gob piles and impoundments and acid mine drainage. And we have some great programs existing. Paul Simkevich's work at West Virginia University is absolutely groundbreaking. And we hope that the solid materials, we can be as successful in extraction. We purchased a backpack coring apparatus, which has been very frustrating to use, but gives us a lot of good information because it's a continuous sample through some of these gob piles, which, are just, it's the garbage of bituminous, that's what it stands for. But you'll notice that we're sampling in Kanawha State Forest. There's a huge gob pile in the middle of the forest that you probably have hiked around a lot of times and maybe never knew it was there. Some of these refuse piles have been reforested for generations. So just because it's a traditional waste stream doesn't mean that it's not under, trees on the back of somebody's farm. It is still an extractive process, and it can be hard to find. All right, last one. There's information in here, some slides with a lot of text that you can read on your own, but I put it in there so you would have it. The West Virginia Geological Survey has been working a lot on carbon storage lately. And we've been able to inform because we have information from a decade and a half of shale gas drilling in the subsurface. And without that, we would not be able to, provide the information that we can to parties that are interested in carbon storage in West Virginia. So, major part of decarbonization efforts, essential to blue hydrogen. So for ARCH2, anybody who's going to, produce blue hydrogen has to have CCS. The increase in the 45Q tax credit as part of the Inflation Reduction Act has really spurred interest and activity in West Virginia. We have some different options: enhanced oil recovery in some of our old production fields, utilization in chemicals, and then deep saline aquifer storage. There are concerns from local environmental groups about the degradation of freshwater aquifers and potential for induced seismicity, which means that you create an earthquake. We've been working to map these opportunities in the subsurface for over 20 years now. These are both products that have come out of the West Virginia survey. We've mapped an entire area, but I'm just showing you what we have in the state. On the left are our depleted oil and gas fields and the potential there. On the right is one of the deep saline units that we're looking at. This is actually one of the units that AEP Mountaineer targeted. And there's a feature there. That linear feature is the Rome Trough. And so all of the geologic units dive into the subsurface to depths that sometimes we have not encountered them yet. So things get really deep, but we think the potential for storage may increase as you have those thicker units. There are 3 miles, literally here where we are, more than 3 miles of sedimentary rocks beneath our feet. And so to try and conceptualize this can be very difficult, because not only are you thinking in 3 dimensions as these things change through time, or as you move fluids through a reservoir, that's really 4 dimensions. So as we try and educate the public on these opportunities, we break it up into 3 miles, and these are conceptual miles, they're not measured miles. And so your first mile for carbon storage doesn't even start until 2,600 feet. You cannot get a dense gas flood in a reservoir until you're deeper than 2,600 feet. In West Virginia, most of our aquifers are shallower than 1,000 feet. There may be a few that are a little bit deeper, but no more than 1,100 or 1,200 feet. And so, that first mile is our anthropogenic mile. That is, for the most part, the extent of human investigation. All of our shallow oil and gas drilling from the first generation of the petroleum industry is within that first mile. And it ends around the Marcellus Shale. So that was the first unit that we really looked at for shale gas development. It also has a regulatory significance because deeper than the Onondaga limestone is considered a deep well, and it has to go through the Conservation Commission for just evaluation of some different parameters, well spacing, and making sure that you minimize waste of the reservoir, that you utilize all of the reservoir. So that gets us into the second mile. And there are some carbon storage targets that we're looking at in this second mile, the second package, and they are in general isolated sandstone bodies. So this is the Oriskany sandstone, the Tuscarora sandstone, which makes natural CO2 in the Kanawha Valley, in the Indian Creek field, and the Newberg sandstone. So these are isolated sand bodies that have excellent containment. They were investigated for natural gas. A lot of them made water, which used to be a problem, not a problem anymore. We like the ones that make water now. And so that means we can go back into the drilling records and see where the unsuccessful wells were, see where the water leg was encountered, and you absolutely could put CO2 there. The second mile of strata ends at about the Utica Shale, which is now the deeper subsurface target for generally just dry gas in West Virginia, but maybe some liquids as you come east from Ohio. And so that starts this third mile, and that's what we are exploring now for these deep saline targets. And these are a set of Canberra Ordovician sandstones and carbonates that were drilled as part of the AEP Mountaineer project in Mason County and have been evaluated as petroleum targets generation after generation. It's very serious investigations into these reservoirs, but they were all unsuccessful. They did not find the hydrocarbons, but that doesn't mean that there's not reservoir there. West Virginia has made ourselves a leader in the CCUS space thanks to some of the policies that the legislature has enacted. And the first one was House Bill 4491. This is a great comprehensive bill. All of the information is there. The probably high level, most important is that now we're talking about pore space ownership. So we're no longer talking about the minerals that pass through a reservoir that might be locked in. You're talking about the actual mineral framework. And so ownership of that framework now reverts to the surface owner. So where perhaps you did not own your minerals, but you owned your surface, now because you own your surface, you own your pore space and you can lease for CO2. You must do this in communication with the mineral owners because that mineral estate still does take primacy. And there's a unitization clause at 75%. The follow-ons to these bills were Senate Bills 161 and 162. That was last year that those passed. 162 was the one that gave the state authority to lease our pore space. And so we've been discussing that with different interested parties. West Virginia is also exploring Class 6 primacy from the Environmental Protection Agency. Hopefully we are close. We're close? Good. So Louisiana was just granted primacy, and so we have watched them go through probably what's coming up next for us. And so when we are given the green light from EPA, the next thing that happens is the public comment period. And there has already been some public comment out there. This is a letter that was submitted to EPA by 17 different groups, and they had several different concerns. There's one that deals with the geology that I wanted to address because it contains inaccurate information. And so this is the statement, and it's concerns about ability to monitor these facilities long-term, post-injection, and that West Virginia lacks the practical experience to do so. When in fact, we were some of the first movers in the space. Okay, so it was not permitted as a Class 6 because Class 6 didn't exist yet. but we had a successful injection test at the AEP Mountaineer facility. The injection interval is thin there. It had good injection, but a long lateral spread. And the economics were very different, at that time. So, to say that the Mountaineer project was not successful is not really true, at least from the geologist's perspective, and that we have permitted this. But then also in the peer review literature are the lessons learned from the post-injection site care. We have done it, we have published on it, it's out there. We're happy to talk to any of these groups if they have concerns, because we have been working on this for over 20 years. And the material is technical, it can be hard to access. And so we're really happy, service and outreach is a large part of our mission, and we're happy to talk to anyone who has questions. So in summary, we have a broad, a wonderful endowment of natural resources. We all know that in West Virginia. But we need to look more at some of these other parts of our portfolio, and geologic characterization will be critical for that. So thank you very much.
Questions from members of the authority? Yeah.
Great presentation. When you were talking about critical rare earth mineral, does it seem reasonable that drill cuttings would contain those products, those minerals that you are?
Yeah, so especially the organic shales, if we're drilling for 4 miles in the subsurface and collecting all those cuttings along the way, the shales seem to be enriched in vanadium and some other copper in some areas. So yes, they are a resource, and yes, they are disposed of in a special cell that you could tap into potentially. But what I've heard is that a lot of times there are other things mixed in to those cells, like sawdust, that could hinder the extraction process.
You mean in that separate area?
Right, right.
Can I expand my question? Also include maybe produced water over time?
Absolutely. So this deep section that we're looking at, I have mineralogy from a test well in Putnam County, the Cabot 50 well. And the deep section appears to be highly enriched in battery minerals. And we believe that it may be in the produced waters as well. So that is a little bit different than the produced waters in the Utica, which is a little bit different than the produced waters in the Marcellus, but they all have certain elements that are in the critical minerals list.
Mr. Chairman, one more question. You mentioned the Rome Trough, which of course always generates the thought of the Rogersville shale, which is very deep. Is that a potential sequestration formation?
Yeah, so the reason that we know about these deep dolomite units is because of a Rogersville test well that Cabot drilled. And they donated that information to the state for our Rogersville consortium study. And so we were able, with that modern data, to see that we have 2,000 feet of open fractures that appear to be contained both above and below. And we would not have known that without the Rogersville investigations.
Any other questions for Jeff?
Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. I had a question. Have you guys specifically looked at any of the strata in West Virginia or concentrated rare earth? Kershaw Plant Clay, I don't know if you're familiar with that donation for the volcanic origin.
Yep. So, and the fire clay seam, it has a volcanic, tonstein is what we call them, and they are elevated in rare earths. And so we have looked at that. Most of the coals don't have that volcanic component, but what we're finding is the Allegheny Formation seems to have the highest rare earths, and the Katanning, lower middle Katanning, upper middle Freeport seems to be a sweet spot. So we're going to look at those in a little bit more detail.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Now I'd like to welcome Garner Marks, who's General Counsel to the Department of Commerce to give us a brief update on the status of the rule that was promulgated by the authority. It's 53 CSR 5 on the petitioning of the authority for approval of decommissioning or deconstruction activities related to power plants. Thank you.
Thank you. I know you've been guided by my former colleague Graham Platts on this up to now. We appreciate all the efforts that he's put in. He's left us to go to private practice, so all the best to him. And you have to deal with me now on this subject, and I apologize for that. But I will go through, there are kind of 4 main categories of amendments that the Legislative Rulemaking Committee has made. The first of which are kind of formatting and the submission of the actual petition. The initial version that we submitted, that this body approved, called for 8 physical copies to be submitted to the authority. They've elected, the legislature's elected to amend that to 1 physical copy for the authority and a PDF version, an electronic copy. That copy, they've also amended the page limit. The previous version called for a petition's page limit of the substance. That's not including the attachments and addenda and supporting documentation, of 5 pages. The legislature's expanded that to 20 pages. And they have also removed the 3-page limit on public comment submissions. That public comment submissions can now be as many pages as, or it's not called out specifically in the rule any longer. So that covers the first type of change that they've made that are more format based. They've also amended in a 1-year shot clock, call it, that the authority is required to make a decision on a petition within 1 year. That is silent on, that addition that they've made is silent on any sort of tolling or extensions that may be necessary for the authority. I know that was a discussion, this bill, it's actually, for your reference, Bill 4103 in the House. That was discussed yesterday, and our executive director of the Office of Energy was there to speak on it. There was some discussion about adding a tolling or some sort of a reasonable extension to that year limitation, but the amendment didn't get made yesterday. But that bill made it out of House Energy and Manufacturing and will be going to House Judiciary next. So we'll keep an eye on that. The next amendment that was tweaked by the legislature covers confidentiality of proprietary information in the petition. The legislature has shifted the initial version of proprietary information to allow petitioners to make redactions themselves on what they believe is proprietary, and give an explanation as to why they feel that information should be kept confidential for Freedom of Information Act purposes, and then allows the full authority in executive session to review those and make a determination in executive session as to what should and shouldn't be maintained as proprietary information. And the final amendment that they made is really just kind of a cross-reference amendment or addition to reference Chapter 29A, Article 5, Section 1, related to contested cases. That section, or that article of code calls out or provides really a process for challenging a determination of the authority And that's all kind of spelled out in Chapter 29, Article 5. And that kind of sums up the amendments that were made. As I noted, the House Bill 4103 made it out of Energy and Manufacturing yesterday. It is headed to Judiciary next, and like I said, our Executive Director, who is next up to present, was there to speak on behalf of the authority. So I'm sure he'd be happy to give an update as to how that went if you guys have any questions.
Hey, Garner, do you anticipate a Senate companion bill?
I believe there is, but usually they work together to figure out who's going to run which one. So I have not been involved in that determination as to which side's running it, but the House bill is moving. So.
Further questions for Garner?
What was the biggest item you mentioned, the bill for Callan, to specify who would do the authority review?
So that 29A 5.1 calls out, there's a process for the authority itself to take up the appeal and basically build a record and review their own determination. And then if the appellant still was dissatisfied, they could take it to court. So.
Any further questions? Well, thank you very much, Garner.
Yep, thank you.
Next, we'll have our Executive Director report. Nicholas Preservati.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to go back to the special thanks to Hans running the LPO office. They've been working very hard with us and West very quickly. First, behind you, I'd like to introduce our new Deputy Director, Sarah Nestauer. She been with us for several months. We have hired Jackson Igo as a new hire in our office. He's an energy specialist and looking to put a certain percentage of his workforce to directly supporting the authority. So we're going to be bringing him into the meetings and having him as a resource for authority issues. And then Garrett Weaver has been assigned as the new program manager. He'll be overseeing all federal grants through Odyssey Energy. I have the primary contacts on it, and that's those. And then there's two projects, two grant applications that I'd like to address real quick. The first one is the GRID. It references GRID, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, preventing outages and enhancing the resilience of electric grids, formula grants. This was the grant application that was brought to me previously by the Office of Energy, I think it was last year, detailing microgrids, and 5 microgrids throughout the state of West Virginia. We've since changed directions and determined that may not be the best approach going forward for the grid funding. We've decided to develop a strategy that addresses the state as a whole and can affect people in a much greater width. So what we did was go back to the utilities and inquire of them and said, what is the best application for these funds that will give us the most change in West Virginia? And every utility we talked to came back with the same answer. And it's addressing the radio circuits throughout the state, including tie-ins on the back of those circuits with smart sensors, so that when a radio circuit goes down, they can backfeed it from another circuit almost instantaneously. And that's the proposal that we're going to be going forward with DOE. Tree falls now, as we progress with this, tree falls in front of the circuit, takes out the entire circuit, we can backfeed it from the neighboring circuit and restore power to the majority of the down circuit. We're going to prioritize circuits. Our office is going to fund the projects submitted to us on a priority needs basis. So what that means is we'll look at the circuit and rate them based upon length, weight of the circuit, reliability of the circuit, how many outages has it had historically, priority put on the length of those outages, the number of customers served by the circuit, and then the number of critical customers served by the circuit, whether it's police departments, hospitals, nursing homes, among other factors that we're going to work with the utilities to build out and determine which circuits need to be funded the most. The feds awarded us $8.1 million. Previously, we just are in the process of getting another $3.2 million. And it's anticipated there will be 2 more funding cycles for 25 and 2026. We are going to submit our revised paperwork from the microgrids for this new concept this week. And pending DOE approval, we anticipate having moving on this as quickly as possible. Second grant opportunity we want to discuss is the CPRG. It's known as the Carbon Pollution Reduction Grant. That's a EPA grant to the states, $2 million to develop carbon reduction strategy. Our office is in charge of implementing that grant in conjunction with the DEP and other state agencies that are working with us. So we have developed, and what I've handed out to you are our proposed reduction strategies. There are 6 sectors that we are to consider reducing emissions in the state of West Virginia. We're not addressing all of them. The sectors that we are addressing primarily are the power industry sector, the industrial sector. We will be addressing transportation, working with DOH, and then the commercial residential building sector. And what we've done is list the strategies there. I'll go through all of them. So the first page is power generation. Our strategies include improving the efficiencies of existing power generation fleets through heat rate improvement and other efficiencies, and then developing strategies to embrace new baseload generation in West Virginia, including small modular reactors, geothermal, hydropower, and natural gas. As we go through each of these strategies, you'll see carbon capture sequestration is another strategy that we want to use to reduce the emissions, pairing that with the existing plants and the proposed the ARCH2 hub to see if there's synergies there that we can do as well. Ultimately, the plan is April, we have to submit our final strategies March 1st. And then we have the opportunity on April 1st to submit a competitive grant application for funding of projects in line with these strategies. So between now and April 1st, we're going to be soliciting projects from private industry, public entities, nonprofits, NGOs, everyone. If they have a project where they want to increase the efficiency of their power plant, they submit their project to the Office of Energy, we vet it, and if we approve it, we submit it to the EPA for funding. If it's granted, we will be the administrator, we get the funds, and then we administer that grant to the private entity. So we're going to be looking for projects to increase efficiency of existing power plants. We're going to be looking for soliciting projects for new generation in West Virginia, for carbon capture sequestration projects in West Virginia. We're going to be requesting projects. We are requesting projects now. They can reach out to our office for that information. It's on our website. This document is posted on our website. We will likewise, if you look at the industrial sector, major causes of emissions are power generation, natural gas operations, and coal mining. And the escape of methane from those operations, we are looking for projects that private industries or in conjunction with others will want to fund to capture those emissions. And we'll get those and hopefully get an application funding. Again, it's competitive. The entity will get the funding. The EPA set aside $4.6 billion to fund these projects nationwide. The largest tranche of monies for projects of between 200 to 500 million, and I will represent that our office is anticipated and willing to submit an application in that range, 200 to 500 million. We want to seriously work with utilities, other private industry to see what projects may be available, and this is an opportunity to fund projects we might not be able to otherwise do. So if you have any further questions about that, please let us know. Again, projects submitted to our office have to be submitted by March 5th. We can provide the criteria for that, and we'll be putting that on our website as well. We have to submit our application to the EPA April 1st. Chairman, that's all I have. I'd be willing to take executive session.
Questions for Mr. Kuzma?
Seeing none, thank you very much. Now on to announcements. I have no real announcement. We'll get with the members and figure out our next meeting date. Don't have one locked in yet. Any announcements from any other member? Seeing none, any remarks? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it, we're adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Hey, Garner, Senate Bill 141.
Senator Jeffries.